Hello everyone, my name is Matt. My population is prescription drug misuse, abuse, and addiction. In this PowerPoint, I'll be going over some of the environmental and cultural factors. To sum up quickly the health concerns that this population faces, it includes a couple different social determinants of health, including access to appropriate healthcare and resources, as well as other social and cultural factors that we'll be discussing further actually in this PowerPoint. Additionally, there is an aspect of risk for mental illness. Trauma has been really associated with just substance abuse in general. And then there's also a risk for self-harm, overdose, suicide, that we'll also talk a little bit more about. So let's go ahead and get into it. Talking about the cultural environment, how the media kind of portrays this population. Most often when I see this in films or movies, it seems like it's the actor is down in a slump trying to escape stress. I think about, a stressed mom who's chasing her kids around the house, and you see her, go to the medicine cabinet to pop a couple Xanax to help take the edge off. Or a scene that sticks out distinctly in my mind is from Daredevil with Ben Affleck, where you see him pop a couple Percocet, and there's multiple pill bottles all over his countertop right before he, goes to sleep for the night. There's some truth in that stress can be one of the roots to this problem. However, a lot of these inaccurate depictions can lead to even encouragement of some of these unhealthy behaviors. Talking about family support. When we're talking about, for example, a specific age, adolescence, family support is huge. There have been studies that have shown that parents that set up plans with their children can help them avoid some of these unhealthy behaviors that can lead to suicide and overdosing. Over-the-counter cold products and histamines like Benadryl, hydroxyzine, I've seen time and time again used as a means of a suicide attempt, which is terrible. But parental support can play a large role in that. Sometimes familial relationships can actually be the source of stress and make it worse. And in some cases, the lack of support overall can increase stress and add even more to the problem. Talking about the roles of peers, this is also a little age dependent. As we know, related to the developmental stage, adolescents seek more from their peers than they do from their parents. It's just part of that developmental stage. And so kind of the groupthink behavior and their peers will really have a big influence on their health behaviors during that time. That's how kids can get involved in all sorts of drugs. They can go seeking in their parents' medicine cabinets and finding stuff that, that they can share with their friends or get high on or whatever. As the population ages, relationships become deeper, more meaningful as people go into adulthood and later into life, and so their peers can actually be a source of support rather than a source that might detract or be destructive in nature. The cyclical nature, discussing that, addiction itself is a very cyclical process. person gets involved in substance abuse, tries to quit, tells themselves that they're never going to do it again, will go for a while, and then fall right back into it. And so this can be a result of personality tendencies, impulsive and addictive behaviors that they might exhibit even before they get involved with any sort of substance abuse that can start with prescription drug use. It's a little different from alcoholism, where that has been shown to be genetically passed on. If your parent was an alcoholic, you are genetically predisposed to that. It's a little different with prescription drugs. It has been shown that the personality traits and the behaviors that we see from our parents are more likely to be passed on rather than addiction to a specific prescription or a specific substance. Within our legal or political system, drug-related offenses are actually penalized pretty heavily. And whatever your standpoint is on that, there have been efforts made to try to legalize or at least decriminalize a lot of these drug-related offenses to reduce them to fees or fines rather than hard jail time for possession of a controlled substance or things like that. And efforts have been made to try to focus on rehabilitation and addiction recovery programs and treating the individual rather than punishing them for a lifetime for, the choice made to abuse a certain substance. At the local and state levels, most of the help is available once somebody has already reached the addiction stage. There is, people who might misuse or abuse drugs. It kind of goes under the radar, and but those people are encouraged to seek mental help, counseling, and that sort of a thing. Some of the potential barriers within a culture, religious beliefs, especially here in Utah, whatever your opinion on this is, it certainly is a contributing factor. Just one example, in the LDS faith, they believe in avoiding alcohol. As a result, alcoholism is less of a problem here, just overall. However, this has contributed largely to the opioid epidemic, which is rampant here in Utah. Just kind of the belief that since medicine was prescribed by a doctor, it must be okay to use however they need, and addiction and tolerance can develop pretty rapidly. And there's kind of this prevailing idea too that is shown through a lack of education that if some medicine is good, then more must be better. In the international scene, there have been some countries that have attempted to decriminalize all drug use, and some have had varied levels of success regarding health outcomes. Some have actually seen reductions in overdoses overall, hospitalizations, which is really good. It's hard to, whatever your feelings on this, it's hard to measure the societal impact of that, how it affects employment or education level or things like that. International resources regarding addiction recovery, they are available, but most of the time they'll just point you in a certain direction and try to refer you to more local resources. The World Health Organization, for example, and that'll get brought up again later on in the presentation. Regarding health disparities, the socioeconomic status certainly affects this population, just because it will directly affect their access to health resources such as counseling, addiction recovery services, rehab. If they can't afford it, if they're not even able to afford basic necessities such as food or housing, mental health is going to be kind of low on the priority list, and that just harkens back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The physical needs need to be met first before we can start thinking about emotional and mental needs. And so as a result, sometimes these mental health issues that are related with substance abuse kind of fall through the cracks. Regarding race and ethnicity, in some ethnic backgrounds or cultures, discussing mental illness and associated substance abuse is sometimes stigmatized. It can be seen as weakness, talking about that and admitting that. And then race can also be a risk factor for a lot of chronic illnesses, which add to stress and can result in prescription misuse, abuse, and addiction. We kind of already discussed this, and so I'm not going to spend too much more time on this. Just going over again how religious beliefs can affect this issue. Within gender differences, it's just been shown that trauma can lead to PTSD, and as a result, just as a coping mechanism, some can turn to, prescription drugs to try to cope with the trauma that they experienced. And so men, this can be as a result of military service or combat. And with women, it can be a result of domestic violence at home, rape, or physical, emotional abuse. Regarding geographical location, those living in rural areas are kind of the ones that suffer the most, just because if they suffer, an overdose or anything like that, they are just simply further away from resources. They just don't have as good of access, and so that will cause a delayed response and could really greatly affect the overall health outcome and produce a poorer health outcome. Telemedicine can help here. Counseling services offered over the phone can be helpful, and so that is something that comes into play. Regarding bias, implicit bias is these stereotypes that we have that we don't even realize, and so sometimes we look at those that abuse prescription drugs, and we might treat them differently just because. And we don't even realize that we're doing that. However, with explicit bias, this comes into play with, employment opportunities or education opportunities, where somebody who has dealt with drug addiction in the past might be denied simply because they're a drug addict, and there's a stigma attached to that. On the international level, the World Health Organization exists to improve access for all healthcare and other essential services, and they also monitor, gather data, and provide information. This is a really good resource that will kind of point you in the right direction, mainly in order to, find something more local at the state, local, or national level. And so that's just one example of an international resource. And thank you for listening.